Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome back to the temple on our sixth day, this Saturday, this baking day. Hello, Billy. What's in the
Hello,
oven?
Dougald. Sorry?
What's in the oven?
What's in the oven? I think we don't know yet. I think that's the exciting thing. There is something in the oven, and there's a lot in the oven today. Um, and I'm just going to get the
There we go.
magical prop. There we are, our appliance for the day. And today is, it's all about the heart. It's the heart chakra. It's love. And it's the part in the week where we do come together. And this baking is all about, if we don't bake together, we feast together. So it's the feast in that sense, maybe from a sort of religious point of view. It's the sharing the goodness together. I've just got. There was something, I don't know if you saw what I sent you just quite recently, Dougald.
No, I didn't.
Okay, so this was just like a brief kind of précis of the Roman festival of Saturnalia. So today is Saturn, as in Saturday, and I love this sort of description that all norms were overturned for this festival. Even gambling was permitted, and masters provided table service for their slaves. And in the musical cycle on the album, it's the point where the whole sequence, but both as a melodic structure and also as then a sort of harmonic structure, everything's turning backwards. So it means we're looking backwards, but we're also, like, time dissolves as well. Like through this process of baking, through this fire, where everything from the week goes into this fire and is rekindled into something else.
There is something alchemical about baking.
Yes.
It's the sort of, there's an archetypal irreversibility to it. It's a proverb that you can't unbake a cake. You take certain ingredients and you put them through the process, of the mixing and beating and whatever else, and then you put it in the oven, and you can't get the things that you put in there back out again. They are irreversibly mixed together. And also when you're cooking, so I live with someone who's an amazing cook who never follows a recipe. And with most kinds of cooking, you can get away with not following a recipe because you have the opportunity to intervene in the process. You can add things, you can change your plans. Whereas when you're baking, you mix the stuff together and then you put it in the oven, and thou shalt not open the oven midway through. There is no good comes of that. That thing where it's nearly done and you have to take it out and really carefully, quickly check to see whether it is cooked through and then get it back in, because it can all go to pieces if you open the oven when it's part way through baking. So there's a lot of stuff there, in the same way as when we were on brewing on Thursday. There are things that are peculiar to that as a process. There are also things that are peculiar to baking, or at least come into focus with baking as a process that are interesting to think about.
Yes. Well, I mean, what you said there about the oven being closed, and thou shalt not open the oven. I mean, that is the secret act of, the secrecy around magical acts, basically, isn't it? Things are done in quiet, but also, away from, I suppose, contained within there is belief. It's going to be good this week. I hope it's going to be good this week.
So you mean you put it put it into the hermetic vessel of the oven, and then you have to have faith. And you mustn't be a sort of a doubting Thomas and try prodding it. You have to just let the This is great. This is so good that we're at Baking Day, and it is Holy Saturday within the Christian calendar. So we're at the moment where Jesus is in the tomb or in the underworld, depending on which layer of the story you're operating in. And we're in between the action. I've never in my life thought of the tomb as an oven before, or as Easter as baking, but that's now going to be part of my meditation for this Easter weekend. So
Brilliant.
we have
That's
an
fabulous.
extra ingredient, I think.
Oh, hello.
You're looking for
What
something.
was that?
Okay.
We have a receptionist behind the counter.
We have a shop assistant behind the counter, stuff
Yes.
the very glorious till that we have that's left over from an
Oh,
early
oh, yes.
incarnation of the shoe
Oh,
shop
wonderful.
than this shop counter was from. Anyway,
Is it
as you
still
were,
yours?
Billy,
Does
sorry,
it make a noise?
extra
Oh, sorry.
ingredients.
Start again.
No, I was saying
Okay.
as you were.
Oh, as I was. Of course, I go back to how this was when I was at Mom's house, looking after this 90-year-old lady. And it always seemed like such a treat because she's entrusted me with her kitchen. And this is the kitchen where she'd easily spent 50 years of her life, living in this house. And she had all of the accoutrements, she had the tins, she had all the exacting, cooling trays and all of that stuff. And, really real vintage equipment. And I suppose that felt like a dream, because she never came into the kitchen, she couldn't come into the kitchen. So I suppose there was also the sense in which I was doing the secret act, and she was entrusting me with, bake some scones. And I hadn't really done that much in my life before, and there was always that moment of reveal, and how did I do, and in the process she would give me comments and say, could you use a bit more this, that, the other, so I suppose it felt like permission to be creative, in a way that I suppose all the other things that I did for her perhaps maybe didn't feel quite so much, of that sense of magic, of like having free reign, but within her sort of guidelines still, obviously. You've kind of frozen slightly for me now, but I can see a smiling Dougald.
I'm still here.
I wonder if I need to try reconnecting.
Well, I'm still here
I'm
and still hearing you, so hopefully other
not
people
hearing you now,
are as well. But if you're not hearing me, then Billy, I think what I might do is put the first of today's tracks on. So let's see. We can have the harvest, and then when we come out of the harvest, I hope Billy will be back with us, and we can talk a little bit about how this is, what's going on, what the harvest is within the process of Baking Day and within the process of the week. So yeah, let's have a listen to The Harvest from Billy Bottle's Temple of Shibboleth.
Sometimes the harvest of the things we said and did may seem peculiar when reopening the lid. Sometimes the silence is so painful it can hurt, but I know something wonderful is in the dirt.
Well, there we are. That's The Harvest. Very short track. So didn't quite give us time for Billie to reappear, but we'll see. No doubt she will be back with us shortly on this baking day. There's otherwise I will take you round the other side of the shop counter and show you. I'm going to do that anyway while we wait to see if Billie's coming back to join us. So we had a glimpse of the shoe shop yesterday, but what you can't see from that angle over there is we actually have an oven, a wood-fired stove that has been here since 1911 when the house was built. It wasn't originally a big open space down here like this because in 1911 you didn't have shops this big where you had lots of stock displayed. That was opened up later in the development of the three generations who ran this as first a shoemakers and then a shoe shop. But in one of the rooms that this ground floor would have been divided up into was this wood-fired stove, and you can absolutely bake things in the oven, although I haven't got it fired up today. And the big orange pot on top there is the goose pot. It's not as old as the stove, but it was Anna's 40th birthday present. So I'm back at the table and waiting to see if Billie is going to reappear. Meanwhile, any of you who perfect timing. Let's say I'm letting Billie back in, but feel free to join in on the comments and the chat with me and tell me what's going on out there. Tell us where you are watching from. Billie, welcome back.
Hello.
We had the harvest. We played the harvest while you were gone.
Oh, good.
Would you like to talk to us about the harvest and the process of harvesting and what goes on Baking Day in the temple?
So starting from the point of view of, how that is in the home, before talking about the temple, it's the time, Saturday morning, where traditionally it's too late to get any more ingredients. Maybe someone is about to turn up with, an extra egg or something. But during the week, we've already on Monday morning started the process of an awareness, of what the end of the week is going to bring, and it's such and such, is coming round, and we need to bake for them, and sort of the planning that goes into today and what that means just in terms of the practical world is we have what we need in order to bake. And so it's too late to get anything else. And so today is all about, entrusting the oven with what you've collected. And so in the temple, and this, I was looking back over it today and I realized what a commitment and what a ritual it was over the course of the first year to be doing this baking procedure every single week. And what it involved was anything that was said in the temple on the Facebook group during the week, that was harvested on Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. So what I'd do is I would have, I had these square pieces of paper and I laid them out in the order of the week in terms of so if somebody had said, I picked a daisy on Monday, that would go in its own little square and that would be there on washing day as an ingredient that could be used. But it's not equal to an ingredient from Tuesday because it was made on washing day, because it was, it sort of came to the surface on washing day. So therefore it's also that we sort of see it through that lens as well. And, if we want to talk about story arcs, what I do after the process of harvesting or, just after is thinking of these things that have been collected as sort of like your first subject, your exposition, and then the what do they call it in story arcs? Like the inciting incident, is in the ironing, and then Wednesday, mending. You've got like the twist, the thing that sort of solved things, or maybe made it clear what the journey was going to be about.
Right.
So upon collecting these ingredients, it was then possible to sort of have a map of what this cake might be,
A map of a
and
cake. That's great.
a map of a cake, yeah. And I suppose, because the temple allows one to go between the practical realms and the cosmic realms, sort of in a breath. What that meant when I got to the baking, like the bake of all bakes, which was like the sixth batch of 7 weeks that we had, was that I guess I was quite sort of literal about it. I'd sort of go, these are the dry ingredients, and we're going to mix those first, and the mixing process might be that we swap the order of the words around, or it might be that we, fuse some elements together. Here's a field, and here's a I don't know, a television, and they're two separate things that happen, but they happened on the same day. They're dry ingredients, and they're going to come together, And I suppose, like, there was always something very interpretive. It was never an exact science or anything, but that was never the point, really. It's sort of, I guess. Well, it's the paradox, isn't it? Of like, do you need a trellis or do you not need a trellis? And will something grow? Like, how does something grow with and without it?
Yeah.
So anyway, like, I invited people in the group to every week, partake of one, and sometimes I did it with them. Sometimes, I left them to do it their own, and I always created the harvest, just this very simple collection of square pieces of paper with like the I suppose I felt like I was almost like a journalist, whilst I'm interviewing somebody, I'm writing down the thing that in the room at the time sort of lands with me, and also maybe seems to land with the other people in the room at that time. Because obviously, some weeks there are all manner of things that were said, and obviously I had to kind of summarize. I had to
sample from the
yes,
material.
yes, or maybe like some process of condensing. In order to create what would be the sort of standalone piece. And some weeks, of course, we had very, very little. There's days where it says silence, and that was an ingredient as well. That was, very much in the spirit of John Cage. That was as important. The silence, and in that song, "The Harvest." I mean, it's short enough that I can probably read you the lyrics just now. I just heard them. Sometimes the harvest of the things we said and did may seem peculiar when reopening the lid. So we've been through a process, and we look back at what was said on Monday, and sometimes we think, wow, was that even this week? Or like, how does that make sense now? So it's the coming back to it. And, there's a lot in there about how we look back at history and how it's changed, only after 5 days. Sometimes the silence is so painful. I've forgotten the next bit. Sometimes the silence is so painful that it hurts. But I know that something wonderful is there within the dirt, something like that. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. And, I suppose within that was also the capacity within this medium of people to not see things, or the capacity of the time that people were finding other ways to live, and there was no contract in terms of you need to be here contributing. It was so open. I suppose it was open in a way where if you had a commune and you were all sharing the same house, people would probably feel some sense of I need to contribute to this because it's where I'm living and we're sharing this meal together. And even if we got some little way towards that kind of being together, I really think that the temple did and does something that is a home. That is. We're back to sort of gathered and scattered. We're back to how do you make home for people who are not in the same place, and it was always very exciting, and it was also always often quite nonsensical as well. And I think there's an important connection there, which was that nobody felt, as far as I could see, that there was a duty to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They were moved to do it because the invitation left enough space for them, and it left enough space for nonsense, and I'm going to read, just because I've got here somewhere, the sort of guidance that I gave everybody. And to start with, this was a private thing because I didn't know to what extent it would land if I sort of came out with all of my ideas at once. So the process at the beginning was to ask people sort of privately, would you like to do this week's bake?
Yeah.
And once that became a regular fixture within the week, I think people started to grasp that, and they started to look out for what's going to be posted this week. And it's worth saying, the range of things that were posted, songs, stories, illustrations. There was a puppet show. There were videos that used all different kinds of dramatic styles, to bring these ingredients together into some kind of coherent whole each week. Poetry. We had a pop-up book. We had a kind of workout video that was bafflement
workout
yoga.
video. I missed that one.
You missed that one. That was quite early, actually. That was Amy Howard. And she did this. It's almost like a sort of guided meditation. And from my end, I was absolutely overjoyed, really, with how much care people put into this, and how much came out of these quite simple prompts. And I think most importantly, we were not creating in the kind of way that that a lot of lockdown projects were creating. And that's not to do them down, but just the comparison between the the cellist who says, oh, cellists around the world, if you record this part, here's the score, I'm going to take your recordings and put you into a video wall of us all playing the same piece on the cello. They were wonderful things that brought people together, sort of in a, I suppose, almost in a kind of a more mechanical way. And obviously people got so much from being part of those projects.
Mm-hmm.
This was a lot more like, let's dream together. So I'm just going to read the guidance. So this is from the week where I was moved to make visible the method for temple baking, that Lupinus, the wolf, which is the familiar of Saturday, has taught us since this place came into being. So every week on Saturday morning, our themes and utterances are harvested, and these are then made available as raw materials to the baker or bakers. So then there's 6 points of guidance, which are, the aim is to take about an hour on it, but that is entirely up to you. It's meant to take about the amount of time that it might take to to actually bake a cake. So 1 to 2 hours is a good amount. The flow from left to right, as I was talking about, represents time passing through the week, but there was no sort of rigidity necessarily about sticking to that by the letter. Not everything needed to be included. If there was one item that really moved you, you could bake on that theme. The functions, of course, are there within the grouping. So the washing, ironing, mending, those those aspects might be useful, but they might not be. And I suppose, obviously what I had to be aware of was that all of these things are going to be landing with people in different ways. And I'm here away from everybody else, not clear about that, and so I suppose that's part of the invitation, like offering an open invitation is also the awareness of, I suppose, the not knowing what other people know or how other people are taking this or conceiving it. That's really important, I think. Then, of course, the art form was completely, it can be any art form or it could be no art form. You can play upon this, satirize it as much as you like. And then that was it, really. It was sort of, given the harvest was given. And then I made a really concerted effort to only be available if people needed me. Once I had made the invitation, it was sort of, I'm passing it over. And it would be lovely to post the result today, but we can eat tomorrow as well. Maybe sometimes the icing ended up being done on Sunday, because that often is the way. The cake was made quite late in the day, and in the morning there's just a quick I know it's rest day, but we're gonna ice the cake a little bit. When sometimes that I was sent some video and I added titles to it, or maybe added a soundtrack or something like that. And then, as I've already mentioned, the silence as an ingredient sort of meant inactivity, but it could be any raw material, chosen from your own experiences, because obviously there's so much that didn't go into that temple group of, where people were at. So it ended up like a way of really like sharing and understanding each other without saying, how are you?
So I know you want to do a bit of baking with what's gone on already this week, and we also have the wolf to play.
We do.
How do you want to do this?
I suppose, we can't really do it in a sort of pictorial or graphic way very well, I don't think. But I suppose, we had various comments that were made this week, in this live stream series, which I think I've got them here.
Okay.
And I think it would be good just to look at them, and maybe I'll read them out, and then maybe we'll talk about how they could be harvested.
All right.
And this is me, like, as ever at this point, sort of on the edge, thinking, is this madness?
Of course it is,
what do we do?
Don't let that stop you.
Well, exactly.
We're 6 days in already.
But I love, exactly. But I love that feeling, and I feel like I always had that feeling at this point. So on Monday, washing day, we have "Hey Lovelies." Are you going to write these down?
I'm going to write them in the chat. Yeah. So you just keep reading, and I'll write them.
Okay. We have "Hey Lovelies." We have "Great to be here and sharing washing day with you."
Keep going.
We have "Putting together bread and listening." Monday for washing, probably the last day I'd pick. So Tuesday, ironing day, we have "Dwell in peace in the home of your own being." Dwell in peace in the home of your own being.
Let me see if I can get there. So Tuesday. Dwell in peace in the home of your own being.
Yeah. So Wednesday, mending day, we have oops, technical difficulties, and then inverted commas, are only real when shared.
I'm just sticking these all up on the screen. We're
Great.
disappearing behind them. So
Great.
Tuesday. Sorry, Wednesday.
Wednesday. So I mean, the full thing is oops, technical difficulties are only real when shared, lol, into the wild quote. I mean, already I would probably condense that to the are only real when shared bit.
Yes.
You know, that feels like the nub for me, is the actual quote itself.
Okay.
Okay. And then Thursday we have square bracket, silence, square bracket. And then Friday, churning day, we have hello churners, we have good morning, we have good analogy, we have love your cool Dougald.
Okay. There we are.
Great. So, you know, like what I would instantly do when I see all of that is I'd make a decision about how many items there were, how many items I felt like I wanted to bake with today. And, you know, if I wanted to just have as few elements as possible, I'd go through and sort of sift maybe the Monday ones and go, okay, so anything that mentions washing, that's already implicit within there. So maybe I'd zoom in on the bread, and I'd just put, you know, putting together bread. You know, that might be our first ingredient. But I mean, you know, we're doing this together, so you know,
Yeah.
I also would ask you what would jump out at you, because maybe we could choose one each for the Monday.
Probably the last day.
Probably the last day. Okay, yes. So maybe we could, if we think of these as dry ingredients, maybe we could start our process by mixing the dry ingredients together. And could we mix some bread and the last day somehow?
I think probably is an important word in there as well.
Probably. Okay. Probably the last day. Probably the last day of bread.
Probably the last day of bread together.
Probably the last day of bread together. Okay. Yes. So that's sort of a reformulated raw material, reprocessed, not genetically modified.
And so then on Tuesday we've got dwell in peace. Or the home of your own. I mean, that whole line is wonderful. Dwell in peace.
It's lovely.
It's lovely. I'm sure it's a quote, but I've forgotten.
Thank you for that, Dan. I would often be, you know, looking to honour people as much as possible in this process, but obviously sometimes that meant that some people's utterances sort of fell by the wayside, you know, in the process as well. And you know, I guess there was a trust there that you know, this was what I was doing in this process was just sort of one possible version of how you could use this material, you know. And I think, you know, then what that did is it then meant that the way that people spoke in the temple also had an awareness that what they said could become a raw material as well, which is kind of an interesting. I suppose hopefully it's like a lovely sort of mild version of being on Big Brother. So our Wednesday, we've got our only real when shared, or maybe difficulties are only real when shared.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of a Yoko Ono quote from a song, which is, "The dream we dream together is only a dream, but the dream we dream alone is only a dream, but the dream we dream together is reality." So Thursday is silence, and Friday, I mean, I really like good morning, good analogy.
Yes, that is good, isn't it? So I'm getting this written down. It always turns into poetry when I do this.
Yeah, good. Good.
That's a grand claim. It doesn't always turn into poetry. It always turns into something that I'm looking at as if it might be poetry.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I mean, you know, we haven't done much to it. We've just sort of sifted and stuff, but you know, sometimes that's enough.
Yeah.
You know,
So
if we're sort of
I'm going to read
in the genre
now what I've
Yeah.
got.
Yeah, go on.
So I have probably the last day of bread together in the home of your own being. Difficulties are only real when shared. Silence. Good morning. Good analogy.
I mean, I need to hear Laurie Anderson say that.
Oh, well, you can dial her up and we'll bring her in on the call.
Okay.
Shall we play the wolf?
Let's do that. Let's play
the wolf. I'm going to get rid of all of these things that I've stuck all over the screen
and
like stickers.
Can I just say, this track was made with this method, but just sort of over and over again, like over the process of 7 weeks. So yeah, hit it, Dougald.
All right, here we go. The Wolf from Billy Bottom's Temple.
The week our ingredients happen to grow, foraging them an experience, so off we go. A pencil non-stop lead, a sticky jar lid, crochet thread, soggy paper that might have had the meaning of life written on it. Just mix them up. Grab and cup. The wolf is in my heart, and I will bake him sweet bread and make a start to fill what cannot be said, but only felt through care and sharing the pride.
There we are. I said in the chat, I love the chorus on that. That's one of the bits of the album that has been stuck in my head since I first listened to it. So we're almost out of time.
We are. That's some of the quickest baking I think I've ever done.
Wow. Well baked. Is there
I
anything
I think that was the 50th, probably the 50th bake of the Temple of Shibboleth.
Splendid. Well, half a century. Is there anything you want to leave us with as we wrap up today?
Probably that line from the song that I just messaged to you, which was, "So much to do, we muddle through." Yeah.
And Eric was riffing off that when I posted it in the chat and telling us that today is also coffee roasting day for him in Canada to help him muddle through.
Great. Great.
So, everyone, good luck muddling through the rest of the day. Yeah, let's just honour the baking for a moment.
Feel the fire. Use it well. Thank you, Dougal.
Thank you. And that looks like a well-used spoon. All right, everyone, go well. We'll see you back tomorrow for resting day.
Mm-hmm.
And see what we do or don't do. It's going to be the wu-wei culmination of this weird week of templing. All right. Bye, everyone.
Ciao for now.